welcome back to Mind Twisters, the weekly podcast where we psychoanalyze today's chronically online and doom-scrolling brain. I'm Audrey.
And I'm Alexis, and we're both psychology students at Georgia Tech. In today's episode, we're diving deep into the psychology of conspiracy theories, a rabbit hole we've all spent hours exploring, whether it's the theory that Chuck E. Cheese really recycles their own pizza, or the idea that the earth is flat. If I were to ask you what a conspiracy theory was, you'd probably tell me it's based on paranoia. But what makes it rejected by the mainstream conscience? The answer is rather complex. It doesn't just have to do with evidence, but with how groups of people interpret it, and how a narrative forms around it.
Yes, Alexis, I totally agree. These ideas can go from entertaining to surprisingly convincing fast, but what's really intriguing is how it warps our realities and sways our trust. Seeing how these irrational beliefs have taken a hold of our culture and politics, we want to analyze what drives people to believe them so strongly despite their lack of evidence. And could any of us believe a conspiracy theory? Why have certain conspiracy theories become so prominent in our digital society?
To find out today, we have Eugene, a moon landing denier, and John V., a space enthusiast who believes in the moon landing. The two of them will be debating before my co-host and I break down the psychology of what we're hearing. Remember, it's not about who is right, but understanding why we think differently and why our brains might think differently.
I hope you guys are just as excited for our guest as we are. John V., why don't you start us off?
Okay, hi Eugene. I know you believe that the moon landing was staged. Can you tell me why?
Honestly, I just don't trust the government or NASA. I feel like they hide things from the public, and the whole thing just seems too perfect. Humanity was just creating its first flying device, and then poof, 60 years later, we're at the moon? Like, it just doesn't make sense. Add to that the suspicious video proof and the pressure from the Cold War, and it just looks like staged.
I get your skepticism about the government, but what specifically about the moon landing makes you think it was faked? I mean, it was such a monumental event for the US, everyone knew about it and was watching it. We even got pictures of the Earth from the moon and videos and audio of the astronauts. What other evidence could you ask for?
Well, for one, the pictures are definitely faked. In the famous flag photo, the flag looks like it's waving, but there's no wind on the moon. And the shadows in the photos don't look right because they go in different directions, like they weren't taken in a movie studio with multiple lights, you know? What's your rebuttal for that?
Oh yeah, I've heard those points before, but I also know they've been debunked. The flag looks like it's waving because it was on a horizontal rod, so it moved when the astronauts handled it. And the moon is super uneven with a bunch of craters, so that could make the shadows look like they're pointing in different directions, even with one light source.
Okay, but what about the radiation belts? I've heard astronauts couldn't have survived passing through them.
Oh yeah, you're talking about the Van Allen radiation belts. They're kind of dangerous, but the Apollo missions passed through them quickly, and they followed trajectories that minimized exposure. It's like if you're going to walk through a fire pit. Of course, fire is dangerous, but that little amount of exposure isn't going to hurt you significantly. The total radiation dose astronauts received was actually pretty safe.
Still, it just feels suspicious. Why haven't we gone back to the moon in so long if we actually made it there?
It's not like we can't go to the moon. NASA's just more focused on other things. After the Apollo missions, funding moved around within NASA and were more focused on things like the space shuttle and space stations. Going back to the moon is expensive, and for a while it wasn't seen as a priority, but a new NASA mission Artemis just went around the moon.
But couldn't all the evidence just be fabricated? And now we have so much more technology that could have faked that Artemis mission too. It just doesn't make sense.
If it were just photos and videos, maybe. But tracking stations around the world followed the missions in real time, including countries that weren't allies to us in the Cold War. Plus, astronauts left reflectors on the moon that scientists still use today to measure the distance between Earth and the moon with lasers.
Oh, I didn't know about the reflectors. But still, governments have lied before. I don't think this is any different. I don't think there's anything you could say that could make me trust them.
I mean, governments have lied in the past, and I also question them sometimes. But for the moon landing to be faked, it would have required thousands of scientists and engineers and even rival nations to stay silent for decades. The scale of that conspiracy would be super hard to maintain.
I don't know. It seems like something the government would be able to pull off. No one really knows what they're truly capable of.
I guess we'll have to agree to disagree. I don't really think the government could pull off something like this at such a large scale.
Well, in 50 years when the restricted files come out, you'll see that I was right.
Sorry to step in, but it looks like Eugene and John V won't be agreeing anytime soon. So let's take a step back and analyze what's really important behind the moon landing, the psychology behind it, and why many believe in the conspiracy theories in the first place.
Yeah, what we just heard isn't just a disagreement about the moon landing. It's a window into why conspiracy theories are believed in the first place.
This conversation can show what conspiracy theories reveal about how people respond to distrust, rejection, and even the feeling of being left out of powerful systems.
Exactly, because if you listen closely, Eugene isn't just rejecting evidence. She's expressing a deeper lack of trust in higher systems. Statements like, I don't think there's anything you can say to make me trust them, point to something more social than scientific.
Right. Conspiracy theories aren't just about false beliefs. They can reflect a need to make sense of exclusion or a feeling of important institutions that don't represent them.
And that's where the psychology comes in. I remember reading a study that showed there are 3 key ideas that help explain what's happening: pattern recognition, agency detection, and threat management. Alexis, why don't you help me break these down?
Of course. So pattern recognition is our brain's habit of connecting dots, even when those dots don't actually form a real pattern.
Oh, like when Eugene points to the flag waving or shadows looking off and builds a larger conclusion from that.
Yes. And then there's agency detection, which is the tendency to assume someone intended something to happen instead of randomness. So we basically look for a hidden actor.
And that shows up in Eugene's assumption that NASA or the government is deliberately hiding the truth.
Exactly. Then there's threat management, which is about the need to feel safe and in control. When something feels uncertain or unsettling, we want to believe there's a clear explanation behind it.
Even if that explanation is a conspiracy.
Yes. And when you connect this back to the debate, you can see all 3 working together through Eugene's thought process.
We see a similar dynamic in fiction too, like in the movie Begonia. Alexis, I don't know if you've seen it, but it's super interesting. The main character, Teddy, interprets ordinary traits like someone's hair or pain tolerance as proof that they're an alien. This also stems from his mistrust of higher systems.
I love that movie. I would definitely recommend it to any listeners who love sci-fi. And it's an example of pattern recognition, agent detection, and assigning meaning and intent where most people believe there is none.
But here's where we can push the idea further. In both the debate and Begonia, these beliefs also create a kind of belonging. They give the person a sense that they understand something others don't.
And that connects to a point I saw in the article interviewing the culture critic ContraPoints. He argues that conspiracy thinking can offer people a sense of identity and community, especially if they already feel excluded or distrustful of mainstream institutions.
So it's not just that they believe something's wrong, it's this belief is doing something for them socially and psychologically.
And that's why simply throwing facts at someone can't change their minds, like when we saw with John V and Eugene.
Yeah, the belief isn't really about facts. It mainly connects to who they are as a person.
And in today's world, social media amplifies all of this. Once someone starts thinking this way, algorithms and online communities reinforce those beliefs.
This even creates echo chambers where those ideas feel validated and even stronger over time.
So what starts as cognitive tendencies, like seeing patterns becoming trends, is reinforced into a worldview.
And that also brings us back to the bigger idea. Conspiracy theories tell us less about hidden truths and more about how people cope with uncertainty, distrust, and social disconnection.
And with that, we want to thank our guests for giving us such an interesting example to unpack.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me here. And I'd just like to say, Teddy in Begonia was right about the aliens. So maybe that's something you should consider.
Yeah, I'm not sure that's the main message we're supposed to get from the movie. I actually think...
I'll let them argue off air. I'd like to thank you, Alexis, as well.
It's always a pleasure.
Stay tuned for next week's episode of Mind Twisters, where we'll be diving into parasocial relationships, why we feel connected to people who don't even know we exist, and how that shapes our thinking. Thank you again.